more than friends. The library was quiet. Jake sat across from Emily, pretending to read his book, but he kept looking up to watch her. Emily was focused, her head down, writing in her notebook. Her hair fell around her face, and she looked so calm, so happy. Jake felt his heart skip a beat. He liked Emily more than a friend should. They had been friends since their first year in college. From the very start, they were close. Emily made him laugh, and she was kind, smart, and brave. He didn't know when his feelings changed, but now he knew he was in love with her. But Emily didn't know. They had shared so many memories. Jake thought back to their first year together, when they both felt lost on the big campus. Emily was the one who walked up to him, smiling and saying,
"Do you know where the math building is?"
He shook his head.
No, but maybe we can find it together.
And so, they walked around the campus, laughing at how lost they were. Emily was confident, leading the way, even if she wasn't sure where they were going. By the end of the day, Jake knew he had found a special friend. From that day, they were almost always together. They studied together, went to parties together, and talked about everything. When Emily got her first internship, he was the first to know. And when she went through her first breakup, she cried on his shoulder. That night, Jake felt something deep inside him, a wish to protect her and make her smile. But he kept it to himself.
"Hey, Jake, are you listening?"
Emily's voice brought him back to the present. She was smiling at him, raising an eyebrow. He had been staring at her without realizing.
Oh, sorry. I got distracted.
Jake said, feeling a bit embarrassed. Emily laughed.
"Well, I asked if you want to have dinner at that new Italian place."
Jake's heart jumped.
Yes, sounds great.
They packed up their books and left the library together. As they walked outside into the cool evening air, Jake tried to stay calm. Being with Emily was easy, but sometimes he wanted more than just being her friend. He wanted to hold her hand and tell her how he felt, but he was afraid of losing her if he did. They walked into the Italian restaurant and found a small table near the window. The lights were soft, and it felt warm and cozy. As they looked over the menu, Emily looked up and smiled at him.
"Do you remember our first day on campus?"
She asked.
"We were so lost."
Jake laughed.
Yes, and I remember you kept saying we would find our way if we just followed the signs.
Emily nodded.
"I knew we would make it."
Jake wanted to say more, to tell her how much those memories meant to him, how much she meant to him. But he held back. For now, he would keep his feelings to himself. The dinner was going well. Jake felt happy, sitting across from Emily, listening to her laugh, watching her eyes light up as she talked. They spoke about work, about funny things they'd seen that week, and about their dreams. Jake loved listening to her. As they finished their meals, the cozy atmosphere of the restaurant and the quiet buzz around them made Jake feel braver. Maybe tonight, he thought, maybe he would finally tell her how he felt. But every time he thought about saying it, a voice in his head warned him.
What if it ruins everything?
Just then, Emily looked at him with a small, serious smile.
You know, Jake, I don't think I've ever told you, but I really appreciate having you in my life. You're always there for me.
Jake's heart raced. She was looking at him in a way that felt so real, so close.
Emily,
He started, feeling his chest tighten. This was it, he would tell her. But before he could finish, a group of people entered the restaurant, laughing loudly, breaking the moment. Emily looked over at the noise, then back at Jake, her expression now light and cheerful again.
What were you going to say?
She asked, tilting her head. Jake hesitated, his courage slipping away.
I was just going to say I'm glad too. You mean a lot to me, Emily.
Emily smiled and reached across the table, giving his hand a gentle squeeze.
You're the best friend I could ask for.
Jake felt both happy and a bit sad. He wanted to be more than her friend, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. Later that night, Jake walked Emily home. The city lights shone around them, and the streets were calm. Emily seemed quiet, as if she was lost in thought.
Thanks for tonight, Jake.
She said as they reached her apartment.
It was really nice.
Jake took a deep breath. Now or never.
Emily, there's something I need to tell you.
Emily looked at him, curious.
What is it?
Jake felt his pulse quicken.
I'm really glad we have each other.
Emily smiled and nodded, and Jake felt his chance slip away again. He was disappointed in himself, but tried to hide it.
Good night, Jake.
She said, giving him a soft hug before heading inside. Jake watched her walk away, feeling both close to her and yet somehow very far. The next morning, Jake received a message from Emily. It was short but surprising.
Jake, can we talk? I have some news.
A mix of excitement and worry filled him. Had something happened? Was it good news or bad? He agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near their favorite park. When he arrived, he found Emily already waiting, looking both nervous and excited. She was holding a letter in her hands.
Jake, guess what?
She said, her eyes sparkling.
What happened?
He asked, feeling his own nerves rise. Emily took a deep breath.
I got a job offer, but it's in another city.
Jake felt his stomach drop.
Another city? How far?
It's across the country.
She said, her voice a mix of excitement and worry.
It's an amazing job, Jake. It's what I've always dreamed of.
Jake tried to hide his feelings, but it was hard. The thought of Emily moving away, of not being able to see her, made him feel empty.
That's amazing, Emily. I'm so happy for you.
He said, forcing a smile. Emily looked at him closely.
Really? You don't think it's crazy?
No, not at all. You deserve this. It's what you've worked for.
Emily's face softened, but then she looked down, as if she wanted to say something else.
Jake, I'm going to miss you so much.
Jake felt a lump in his throat.
I'll miss you too.
They sat there in silence, both feeling the weight of her decision. Over the next few days, Jake found himself struggling with the news of Emily's potential move. Every time he thought about her being so far away, a deep ache settled in his chest. He spent hours thinking about their friendship, about how much she meant to him, and how different life would feel without her. One evening, Jake invited Emily over to his apartment. He wanted to have one more relaxed evening together before she made her decision. He cooked her favorite meal, and they talked and laughed, trying to ignore the big change looming over them. As the night went on, there were moments of quiet between them, and Jake found himself thinking.
This might be my last chance.
After dinner, they moved to the couch, talking in low voices, the comfort of their friendship surrounding them. Jake felt the words bubbling up inside him. He wanted to tell her everything, to let her know how he'd felt for years.
Emily,
He said softly, looking into her eyes.
I've been thinking a lot lately about us.
Emily looked at him curiously, her eyes warm and patient.
What is it, Jake?
Jake took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest.
I just want you to know that. You're really important to me, more than you know.
Emily's face softened, and she smiled gently.
Jake, you mean so much to me too. You're my best friend.
Hearing her call him, that was both comforting and heartbreaking. He wanted to be more than her best friend, but he didn't want to lose her by complicating things. The courage he'd felt slipped away again, leaving him silent.
Thank you, Emily.
He whispered, his voice tinged with a sadness he hoped she didn't notice. A week later, Emily called Jake with her decision. They met at a quiet park where they often went to escape the city noise. Jake's heart raced as he approached her, wondering what she would say. Emily looked a mix of nervous and excited. She took a deep breath and said,
Jake, I decided to take the job. I'm moving.
The words hit him like a wave. He knew he should be happy for her, but the thought of her leaving made it hard to breathe.
When do you leave?
He asked, trying to keep his voice steady.
In 2 weeks.
She said softly.
I still can't believe it. There's so much to do, so many things to pack, and so many people to say goodbye to.
Jake forced a smile.
I'm so proud of you, Emily. You're going to be amazing.
She smiled back, but there was a flicker of sadness in her eyes.
I'm going to miss you so much, Jake. You've been such a big part of my life.
The weight of the unspoken words hung between them. Jake wanted to tell her everything. That he loved her. That he'd never felt this way about anyone else. But as he looked into her eyes, he found himself frozen again. Instead, he reached out and hugged her tightly, pouring everything he couldn't say into that embrace.
I'll miss you too.
He whispered, his voice barely audible. They stood there for a long time, neither of them wanting to let go. As Emily's departure date grew closer, Jake found himself spending as much time with her as possible. They revisited all their favorite spots around the city, the little coffee shop where they'd spent countless hours talking, the park where they'd had their first picnic, and even the library where they used to study together back in college. On the night before she was set to leave, Jake and Emily had one last dinner together. They laughed and reminisced, but there was a sadness that lingered between them, unspoken but understood. After dinner, they walked along the city streets, talking quietly, as if afraid that louder words would break the fragile bubble of peace surrounding them. Finally, they reached Emily's apartment and she turned to Jake with a bittersweet smile.
This isn't really goodbye, is it?
She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jake shook his head, managing a small smile.
Of course not. We'll keep in touch. Call, text, and I'll come visit.
Emily nodded, looking relieved.
Good. I don't think I could handle saying a real goodbye.
He hugged her one last time, his heart aching with everything he couldn't say. As he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd missed his last chance. Months passed after Emily moved away, but Jake couldn't stop thinking about her. They kept in touch, texting almost every day, and he tried to be happy for her as she settled into her new life. But each message, each call reminded him of how much he missed her. One day, while scrolling through old photos of them together, Jake realized something important. He couldn't go on pretending. He had to tell her how he felt, even if it risked their friendship. Determined to express his feelings at last, Jake decided to write Emily a letter. He spent hours pouring his heart into the words, explaining everything he'd held back for years. He wrote about all the moments that had meant the most to him, late-night talks, spontaneous road trips, and every small gesture that had made him fall in love with her. He described the joy she brought into his life, the way she made ordinary moments feel special, and how much he missed her now that she was gone. He even confessed to the many times he'd almost told her, the words lingering on his lips, but never quite finding their way out. Jake ended the letter by saying he didn't expect anything in return, but he needed her to know the truth. If nothing else, he wanted her to understand just how deeply she'd touched his life. After sealing the letter, he hesitated. Part of him worried this would ruin everything, but he also knew he couldn't keep going on this way, torn between love and silence. He took a deep breath and sent it. The days that followed were filled with anxiety. Jake checked his phone constantly, waiting for any response from Emily. He went through countless scenarios in his head, wondering how she would react. Would she be surprised, angry, or, worse, would she ignore it entirely? Each day that passed without a reply felt heavier. He tried to distract himself with work and friends, but Emily's absence lingered, casting a shadow over everything. He missed her more than ever, and the silence only deepened the ache in his heart. One evening, just as he was about to go to bed, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Emily.
Hey, can we talk tomorrow? There's a lot I want to say.
His heart raced. The message was short, but it gave him hope. He barely slept that night, anticipation and nervousness keeping him awake. The next day, Jake and Emily agreed to video chat. When her face appeared on the screen, she looked different, nervous, maybe even emotional. Jake felt his heart pounding, his hands slightly shaking as he held his phone.
Jake, I got your letter. I had no idea you felt that way.
Jake swallowed, nodding.
I didn't mean to keep it from you. I was just scared of losing you.
Emily's eyes softened, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. Finally, she took a deep breath.
Jake, you're my best friend. And honestly, I've thought about us too. but I was afraid of ruining what we had, so I tried to ignore it.
A rush of relief and surprise filled Jake.
So, you feel the same.
Emily nodded, her cheeks flushed.
I think I do, but I also think we need to take things slow. I don't want to lose our friendship, and I want to make sure we're both ready for this.
Jake smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders.
I understand. We can take it slow. I just wanted you to know how I feel.
They spent the next hour talking, sharing memories, and laughing. It felt like a new beginning, a fresh chapter in their relationship. For the first time, they were both hopeful about what the future could bring. Months later, Jake decided to visit Emily in her new city. They'd kept up their long-distance connection, growing closer despite the miles between them. But seeing her in person, walking down her street and meeting her in a cozy cafe made everything feel real. When they embraced, it was different from before. There was a new warmth, a spark they'd both tried to ignore for so long. They spent the weekend exploring the city together, visiting parks, museums, and quiet corners where they could talk for hours. On their last night together, they took a walk through a nearby garden surrounded by soft, warm lights. Emily looked at Jake, her eyes filled with something deeper, something they hadn't fully expressed yet.
Jake,
She said, taking his hand.
I'm glad you told me. I don't know where this will go, but I know I don't want to lose you.
Jake squeezed her hand, smiling.
I feel the same. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together.
As they walked hand in hand under the stars, they knew they were embarking on a new journey, not just as friends, but as to people willing to take a chance on love. Over the following year, Jake and Emily continued their relationship, balancing long-distance visits with late-night phone calls. They supported each other through life's ups and downs, finding comfort in the steady foundation they built over years of friendship. Slowly, they started discussing the future, where they wanted to live, their career goals, and the kind of life they wanted to build together. There were challenges, moments of doubt, but they worked through them, growing stronger as a couple with each passing day. Eventually, Jake decided to move to Emily's city, ready to start a new chapter with her by his side. It wasn't easy to leave behind the familiar, but for him, she was worth every change, every risk. Settling into a new home, they filled their space with memories, laughter, and love. The journey hadn't been easy, and there were still uncertainties ahead, but they knew they could face them together. In time, they realized that the risk they'd taken had brought them more happiness than they'd ever imagined. Their story wasn't just about friendship, nor was it just about love. It was about two people brave enough to take a leap of faith, trusting that whatever happened, they'd find their way together. And as they sat together, planning their future, they knew that every step of their journey had been worth it. Their love was built on years of laughter, shared secrets, and unspoken understanding. It was a love that grew from friendship into something beautiful and lasting.